Hey guys, in today's lecture, we will be discussing The Juniper Tree, a fairy tale written by the brothers Grimm, namely Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. Now this story on the outside might appear as a gruesome tale, but on the inside it has multiple layers of meaning. So it's like peeling an onion. On the outside there is just the onion, but it has got multiple layers to it, right? From the outside, it just feels like a whole, but it has multiple layers to it. Like that, the story too has multiple layers, and like any other fairy tale, the story too contains stereotypes, archetypes, flat characters, round characters. Usually in fairy tale, there will be flat characters, which means that they won't be described in detail. They are just there to add more characters to the story. Their characters are not well delineated in the case of flat characters. Usually fairy tales contain flat characters, but this particular fairy tale contains some round characters as well. Now, as I said, this tale contains multiple layers of meanings, and we will be analyzing it in detail in this lectures. So first, what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to read the tale, following which I'll be giving the interpretations. Okay, so let's begin. Long ago, at least 2000 years, there was a rich man who had a beautiful and pious wife, and they loved each other dearly. However, they had no children, though they wished very much to have some, and the woman prayed for them day and night. But they didn't get any, and they didn't get any. In the front of their house there was a courtyard, where there stood a juniper tree. One day in the winter, the woman was standing beneath it, peeling herself an apple, and while she was thus peeling the apple, she cut her finger, and the blood fell into the snow. "Oh," said the woman. She sighed heavily, looked at the blood before her, and was most unhappy. "If only I had a child as red as blood and as white as snow." And as she said that, she became quite contented and felt sure that it was going to happen. So see, this fairy tale contains some staple elements of a fairy tale. It begins thus: long ago, at least 2000 years. So most of the fairy tales begin with once upon a time or long ago, right? It's a classic beginning of a fairy tale or a folk tale. Long ago, pande in Malayalam, or once upon a time, orudathu, like that fairy tales and folk tales begin. So this is a classic beginning. Now, there was a rich man. Okay, so the rich man is again, the characters are introduced as though they are flat characters. Rich man. The man's name is not given. And in fairy tales, often the characters' names are not given. They are either man or woman, or they are father and mother, and only occasionally do they mention the name of one or two characters, and those characters would leave an everlasting impression on the mind of the reader. Okay, so here again the first character to be introduced is a rich man. So when you say rich man, the character type of that man being rich indicates that the person is wealthy. So the person is wealthy means the person is also dominant. He is dominant. He might be the head of the family. He might be the breadwinner, the person who earns for the family. So he has got some power. So he is a powerful person, right? So a rich man, the word contains all these meanings. Who had a beautiful and pious wife. Now, what do you mean by a pious wife? Again, it is a stereotypical characterization. Pious wife means often the wives, or the first wives for that matter, are depicted as being pious or devout. Here, pious may either mean the woman was religious, or it may also mean that the woman was devout, because both these meanings are possible here, because the woman was devout towards her husband as well as she was religious, because in the story there are elements which says that she was a religious person. And they loved each other dearly. Now the concept of idealized love, where two couple love each other dearly, is also there in fairy tales. There is always a Prince Charming who is there to rescue the damsel in distress. So the concept of eternal love or idealized love is also there in a fairy tale. So these are all concepts which are related to fairy tales. Okay. However, they had no children. So this is again a trope which occurs at the beginning of fairy tales. However, they had no children, which means that the couple were sterile, they were infertile, they were childless. And though they wished very much to have some, indicates that they might be sad that they don't have children. So it indicates sterility, childlessness, and it indicates the sad predicament of the couple. And the woman prayed for them day and night. Again indicates that the woman was pious, the woman was devout, she was religious. She prayed for them day and night. Now this also introduces the concept of woman as an enabler. So usually woman has the biological need to reproduce offspring. So the biological need to produce offspring often falls on the woman. A woman should produce offspring. So a famous feminist critic, Simone de Beauvoir, once said, one is not born a woman, but one becomes a woman. One is not born a woman. It is the society, it is the constructs that makes her a woman. It's a food for thought. Just think about it. When a woman is born, she is not biologically made into a woman, though people might say that there are studies to show that women have hormones like oxytocin and vasopressin which are not present in men, and men have testosterone. So it indicates that men are hunters by nature and women are the makers of the home and hearth by nature, because the level of oxytocin or the hormone oxytocin in their body indicates that they are meant for child rearing and for domesticity. So this concept of women being linked to domesticity is as old as tradition, it is as old as civilizations. That is, woman should take care of the home and hearth is always there. It is there in even, just remember that this fairy tale was again, it has its beginnings 2000 years prior to its telling. That is, all these story tales were told orally, right? And this story tale has its origins 20,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago, which means that this concept was there right from the beginning, that a woman must be an enabler. She has a biological need to produce offspring. And a woman at a certain age of her life develops maternal instincts. These were all there, or these concepts were all there in the society right from the beginning of civilization. So that is again reiterated in this particular fairy tale too. The woman prayed for them day and night, because there is no mention of the man. It's not said that the father or the male wanted to have the children. Because the male also desires to have children, they should also have an offspring or an heir, so that they could give all their wealth to the offspring. So that should be there. Most probably a male heir must be there, and that should be there. But here the man is not desiring for the offspring, but the woman is desiring for the offspring. But they didn't get any, and they didn't get any. Again, see the repetition here. So whenever repetition is used in a story, it means that, again, they are reiterating the statement. They want to emphasize that they never got children. So repetition is for emphasis. The point is made clear that the couple is sterile or infertile, and it also indicates that the story in some way or the other posed the age-old problem of infertility and how couple cope with it. It put forth the age-old problem of infertility and how couples cope with it. So this story is partly going to be about the child who they desire. for the child who is going to be born. So that is there. So the importance of this child is there in that line itself. They didn't get any. They desperately wanted the child, but they never got it. In front of their house there was a courtyard, and there stood a juniper tree. Now juniper tree has significance, and if you remember, in the age-old times, there was this way in which people used to cure themselves, right? They had natural remedies for each and every problem out there, and there were witches. And by witches, I don't mean the people who perform spells and charms and the like that you see in Harry Potter movies. These are not the witches that I am referring to, because the witches itself indicate that these women are magical by some nature. But there was also this concept of healers among witches. So witches were also healers, or women who were considered to be witches in the olden days were more or less healers. They knew natural medicine, naturopathy. They knew how to treat people if they had any ailments. And some of the earlier versions of fairy tales, there would be a mention of a tree or a herb or a particular berry. It might either be poisonous, or it might bring a person back to life. It might either revitalize a dead person back to life, or it might either poison them. So juniper tree has a significance here. So when the brother Grimms compiled it, they might not have actually thought about the significance, but there is a possibility that there is a significance to the choice of the tree, because juniper tree, just remember this, juniper tree and the wood of the juniper tree was used as a herbal remedy to induce contractions for women to go in labor. So when a woman comes to full term of a pregnancy, she has to go in labor, right? But at times, women have long pregnancies, which means that long labors will be there, and they won't go to pregnancy. They will be, they will have contractions here and there, but they won't go into pregnancy. So in order to go into pregnancy, there must be adequate amount of contractions. So in order to induce contractions, juniper wood was taken. So juniper wood was a herbal remedy which was used to induce contractions, and this might be significant because so far we were dealing with a man and woman who were in a sad state because they were infertile and they didn't have children. And now there is a reference to a tree in the courtyard which induces contraction or which induces labor. So that it also signifies that the tree has got significance. So this tree can induce labor. It can produce an offspring. That is there. Okay. So one day in winter, again, winter has a significance. Now, in age-old myths and legends, and even in the times of yore, winter was a time period in which the land was barren. Nothing grew during the winter seasons. We don't experience harsh winters here, but when you move north to Delhi and all, they have harsh winters. But again, snowfall is not that much prominent in any of these places. But again, if you go up further north to the Himalayas or to the hilly regions, or even to Russia for that matter, they experience harsh winters. And during this time period, nothing grows in the soil. Everything is covered with snow. And even in Europe, this was there. Remember, Grimm's fairy tales has its origins in Germany. So it has its origins in Europe. And snow was a popular phenomenon. Winter was a popular phenomenon there. And in all the myths and literatures, winter was used as a symbol for infertility. So it's an age-old symbol of infertility, and it is opposed to spring, because spring is the season in which flowers grew. Even in Kerala, it is there, right? We welcome Onam and we celebrate Onam as our national festival because we attribute certain qualities to spring. And spring is a season of rejuvenation. It is a season in which everything grows. It is a season of plenty. So, spring is a season in which land is fertile, and winter is a season in which land is infertile. So that is also there. This concept has to be kept in mind. So nothing blooms in winter. So the dichotomy of winter and spring is presented here. So by winter, I can also mean death. Winter means death. Nothing grows in winter. So winter means death of vegetation, and spring means birth. So that dichotomy or binary opposites is there. That is, if there is winter, there will be spring. So there is a popular saying, right? There's a popular line written by Shelley, taken from Ode to the West Wind. If winter comes, can spring be far behind? Which gives us hope that if there is death, then there is birth. Then there is this opposite of initial and terminal. Initial means the beginning of life is indicated by the spring, and the terminal stages of life, the end of life, is often indicated by winter. So one day in winter here has significance. One day in winter, again, the woman was barren. It also means that the woman was barren. One day in winter, the woman was standing beneath it. She was standing beneath the juniper tree, peeling herself an apple. Now, this words, though it may seem harmless, has got another connotation to it. Okay, when you learn literature, there are different layers of meanings, even to a harmless word like an apple here. So, the woman was standing beneath the juniper tree, peeling herself an apple. So here, the act of peeling an apple or apple here actually represents the womb. And peeling herself an apple, the apple, means it might mean the shedding of the womb or the shedding of the endometrial lining, which means that she was going through menstruation. So this meaning is also there. As far and out, far-fetched as it might sound, but this meaning is there, and it is quoted in almost all secondary materials that I came across. This meaning of the woman peeling herself an apple, it has got a meaning. This words has got a meaning that the woman was going through menstruation. So on a day in winter, again indicating barrenness, infertility, the woman was standing beneath the juniper tree, peeling herself an apple. The apple here might refer to her womb. And while she was thus peeling the apple, again, it might indicate the onset of menstruation. She cut her finger and the blood fell. So the blood fell. That's why it becomes a clear indicator that this is referring to the process of menstruation. So the blood fell into the snow. So the blood fell. In fairy tale, blood symbolically represents two concepts. It represents conception. When a woman conceives, a certain amount of blood is drawn from her. So, it represents conception as well as it indicates menstrual bleeding. So, these are two preconditions for life. So, before birth to take place, the woman must be fertile. She must have regular menstrual cycles, and other than that, she must also shed some blood in order to conceive. So both these ideas are there here. So she cut her finger and the blood fell into the snow. Again, the snow here indicates barrenness. So the falling of blood may indicate the process of conception, that the woman conceived, or it might indicate that she was a menstruating woman, or she had the onset of menstruation. Both meanings are possible here. "Oh," said the woman. She sighed and looked at the blood before her and was most unhappy. Again, these lines indicate that this might have been menstruation, that the woman had the onset of menstruation. So whenever the woman after marriage, when she has the onset of menstruation and she was waiting for conceiving a baby, she might feel disappointed, because the onset of menstruation means again she has to go through a cycle, a menstrual cycle, and at that time she won't be becoming pregnant. So again the hopes for a child are squashed when the woman menstruates. So, oh, said the woman. She sighed heavily. Sighed means, and the sign is a dirka nishwasam natham. She sighed heavily and looked at the blood before her, and she was most unhappy because she was wishing to get a child, and the onset of menstruation means that she again has to wait for another cycle in order to conceive. If only I had a child as red as blood and white as snow. So again, this is a wish that the woman utters. If only I had a child as red as blood and white as snow. Remember these lines because these are very important in context of this tale. The woman wishes for a child who is close to nature. She wants a child who is red as blood and white as snow. So, red as blood and white as snow are natural attributes, right? These are elements taken from nature, whether it be blood or whether it be snow. These are elements taken from nature. And she wishes to have a child who is red as blood and white as snow. So, red as blood and white as snow is again a simile. As and like, and if you are using as and like for comparisons, then it becomes a simile. And this is also her wish. She wishes for a child who is red as blood and white as snow, as natural as can be. And as she said that, she became quite contented and felt sure that it was going to happen. So again, this is like a deus ex machina, because the moment she uttered it, she felt contented. She felt happy. Contented means she felt happy. The moment she uttered the words that she wants a child as red as blood and white as snow, she became quite happy and she felt sure that it was going to happen. So, this is the element of fantasy in the fairy tale. Her wishes will come true if it is a fairy tale. So, if it is a fairy tale, this wish will come true. So, in the next line, you may, heads up, you may get a wish fulfillment. So, that might happen in the next line. So, let's watch. Then she went into the house and a month went by. And the snow was gone. So once she went into the house, a month went by. So after a month had passed, and she menstruated, and a month had passed, and the snow was gone. Suddenly the snow was gone might indicate that she stopped menstruating, or winter receded. Snow has gone has also another meaning to it, which is the winter receded, which means that she is no longer barren. The winter that was there within her body, it receded. And she was no longer barren. After 2 months, everything was green. Again, green or greenery indicates fertility. And everything was green. So she became fertile. So it is during the 2nd month of pregnancy that the heart of the baby starts beating. So it is only during the 2nd month that we become aware that a woman is pregnant. So a woman becomes aware that she is pregnant during the 2nd month of her pregnancy. So the first month moves by, and by the 2nd month the pregnancy is confirmed, because when you get the heartbeat, the pregnancy is confirmed. So again, just look at these, because this line is very much important. These lines are very much important because usually in fairy tales there are no vivid descriptions. The characters might be described, the hair color of the character might be described. There is an example here. So usually there are no imageries and descriptions. Usually the maximum description that you might find in a fairy tale is as white as snow and as red as blood. And the writer might refer to the forest as being deep, and the princess as being beautiful, and the hair of the princess as being golden. So these are the bare descriptions that are there in fairy tales. But here there is a considerably large description. A para description is given, and that too about pregnancy. Each month of pregnancy is dealt with in detail here, and it is as if the woman goes through different stages of pregnancy, and it is closely linked with nature too. The different stages of a woman's pregnancy is closely related to the different stages in nature, right from conception, the germination of the seed, and the flowering of the plant, the germination of the seed, and the growth. It is described in detail as if the growth of a tree. So let's take a look at it. So, and 2 months and everything was green. She became fertile. 3 months, all the flowers came out of the earth. So it is during the first trimester, that is after the 3-month time period, that usually the heart starts beating during the 2nd month, and then the toes and fingers of the child develops during the 3rd month. So 3 months and all the flowers came out of earth. So flowering indicates that the land is fertile, and sooner the fruits will develop and the tree or the plants will bear fruit. So flowering indicates that this would happen. So again, the 3rd month is the time in which the baby develops their digits, their fingers and their toenails and toes, etc. And 4 months and all the trees in the woods grew thicker, and the green branches were all entwined with one another, and birds sang until the wood resounded, and the blossoms fell from earth. So again, after 4 months, all the trees in the woods grew thicker, and the green branches were all entwined with one another, and the birds sang until the woods resounded, and the blossoms fell from the trees. So after the flowerings, the blossoms will fall off from the tree. Only then will the fruit develop, right? So again, that is again an indicator of pregnancy. Here in the 4th month, the body of the mother blossoms, and the mother might feel the baby's movements. So the woods growing thicker, the green branches getting entwined to one another, even the image of vines getting entwined, it creates a kind of tactile imagery, right? You feel like it is entwined. It creates a sensation of movement. So it shows a sensation of movement. It's also a kinesthetic image. It shows movements when green branches entwine with one another. So movements, again, it is equivalent to the baby's movement within the womb. And it is also the time in which the baby bump appears. So again, the blossoms fall, and everything, and the woman is probably happy because she is pregnant and she knew it. And then the 5th month passed. She stood beneath the tree, which smelled so sweet that her heart jumped for joy, and she fell on her knees and was beside herself. So again, this is again relating to the woman. So, relating the experiences of the woman with what she sees around herself, what she sees around in nature. So, in the 5th month passed, and she stood beneath the juniper tree, which smelled so sweet that her heart jumped for joy, and she fell on her knees and was beside herself. So, the woman has put on weight. So, from 5th month, the mother puts on weight, and the womb develops into a size of a cantaloupe, a fruit. So it develops slowly. The womb begins to develop in size, and the woman might develop increased appetite during this time period. She might feel like eating anything and everything, and she will be happy and jubilant as seen in this particular lines. And when the 6th month was over, the fruit was thick and large, and she cried, "If I die, then bury me beneath the juniper tree." So again, from a very jubilant, a very happy atmosphere, suddenly it turns grim. The 6th month was over, and the fruit was thick and large, and she was quite still. So during the 6th month, again the uterus develops to the size of a basketball. It becomes quite large and prominent. The pregnancy becomes prominent during this time period, and usually women are required to take adequate amount of rest during this time. That is why it is said that she was quite still during this time period. Okay, the 6th month was over and the fruit was thick and large. So again, the fruit in the tree grew thick and it grew large. So again, it might also be a reference to her womb. The lining of her body, her womb developed, her uterus developed into the shape of a basketball. It grew thick and it grew large, and she was quite still. It also indicates the lethargy that a woman might feel while she is pregnant. A woman might feel lethargic. A woman might feel tired, and she requires adequate amount of rest during this time period. And after that, the 7th month, she picked the juniper berries and ate them greedily. And on the 7th month, she picked the juniper cherry. So again, see, during the 5th month itself, the woman grows appetites, right? She feels like eating anything and everything. And again here, in the 7th month, she picked up the juniper berries and ate them greedily, and she grew sick and sorrowful. So during the 7th month of pregnancy, the baby is again developing and the contraction starts, and the mother feels cramp, and she feels cramps all over her body. So she grew sick and sorrowful during the 7th month of pregnancy. Again, then the 8th month passed and she called her husband to her. So I think I skipped this line previously. I'm sorry for that. So in the 7th month, she ate the juniper berries. So this is important because here a woman is eating juniper berries and she grew sick and sorrowful. She might have eaten it because she felt an increased appetite. But this concept of a woman eating a fruit and then becoming pregnant, or a woman eating a fruit during pregnancy and thus saving her pregnancy, is there in almost all tales. Even in our Puranas it is there. In Ramayana there is this huge yaga that Dasharatha conducts, and at the end of which 3 fruits are given to his wives, and they consume them, and then they become pregnant. Similarly, in Mahabharata too, there are instances in which fruits are given to young women and then they become pregnant. So this concept of giving fruits to women and then they become pregnant is quite common in almost all cultures across the world. It is quite common where a woman consumes the fruits and then she becomes pregnant. So but the woman was already pregnant and she ate the fruit greedily and then she grew sick and sorrowful. If you remember, in the tale of Rapunzel too, there is this element of eating cherries which was not meant for them, and then they grew sick and sorrowful about it, and then they had to bear the consequences of it. So this is again there. This is a trope that is there across fairy tales, across folk tales, across traditions. Now, the 8th month passed and she called her husband to her and cried. So till now, the presence of the husband is not felt. When the woman becomes pregnant, suddenly there is no presence of the husband. There is an absence of the husband. Till now, there was no mention of the husband. There was no mentioning of the husband, and now the husband appears. So in the 8th month, she called her husband to her and she cried and said, "If I die, then bury me beneath the juniper tree." So that is her last dying wish. If he dies, or if she dies, please bury me. Please bury me beneath the juniper tree. So the 8th month of pregnancy is the time in which the woman gains a whole lot of body weight, and she will receive increased cramps. She will be feeling cramps in her stomach, and the contractions become severe during this time period. And remember, while the story was written roughly in the 18th century, because the Grimm's brothers, they lived in the 18th century, and during that time period, often women never survived pregnancies. There were a number of reasons for it, mostly because the women at that time used to wear corsets and the like, and it's in one way or the other it affected their health, it affected their pregnancies. So women never survived pregnancies during that time period, and this woman has a genuine reason to fear that she might die of childbirth. Okay, so that is that. So that's why she says that if I die, then bury me beneath the juniper tree. And she was quite comforted. Then she was quite comforted and happy. So she was comforted by her husband, and or after that, after the 8th month, during the 9th month, she felt quite comforted and happy. Maybe her husband might have comforted her. Another possible reason is that during the 9th month of pregnancy, the baby settles down to the pelvis. The baby descends down to the pelvis, and during this time period, the abdominal area of the mother is relaxed, and the woman is able to breathe a little bit easier because the baby starts descending. The woman is able to breathe a bit easier, and this process is called lightening, and most women feel lightened during this time period of their pregnancy, during the 9th month. Okay, and then she had a child. So when the 9th month was over, somewhat she was comforted, she was happy, she felt lightened, and then she had a child as white as snow and as red as blood. And when she saw it, she was so happy that she died. What a tragedy, right? The woman waited for her baby, and she desperately wanted a baby. She was waiting for the baby, and suddenly she dies. And there is just one line that describes her death. How tragic. This is the thing with fairy tales. It drops the bomb in short lines. So again, and then she had had a child as white as snow and as red as blood, and when she saw it, she was so happy that she died. So maternal death during pregnancy or during childbirth was quite common in the olden days, especially during the 18th century. And remember, the time period in which the brothers Grimm lived. They were born in 1785 and they died in 1863. So the time period in which they lived indicates that they lived roughly in the 18th century, and they knew this, that women often died during their pregnancies. And again, remember, they were narrating a story which was 2000 years old. So again, surviving pregnancy was an uphill task for the ladies then. And there was always a chance of being involved in some kind of complication or the other during pregnancy, and this was prominent during that time period, and hence this was a commonplace thing at that time. Women doing in childbirth, or women doing while they were pregnant or during childbirth, was very much common at that time period. Now let's take a look at the observations, and I took this observation from a journal, and this was the title of the article which was published in the journal, Forms of Grotesque in Juniper Tree by Mary Bigger. So I have taken this from her. So let's just, I will just read that so that you'll get a rough idea on this passage. Again, this particular observation is made on the passage above. The brothers Grimm adopted Otto Runz's imagery of a 9-month pregnancy, which marks the story as romantic, and deserts it from the later versions of the fairy tale collections that do not include a parallel description of nature. So as I said before, in fairy tales, usually there won't be nature descriptions, there won't be descriptions of anything. Even characters are described in 1 or 2 words, but this particular story is an aberration, or this particular story is an exception for that concept, because in this particular story there is a detailed description of pregnancy. And why does that happen? And why is it so? Because partly this work was also co-authored by the inputs made by Otto Runz, woman, and she wrote about the pregnancy in detail. Okay, so this story was partly influenced by the writings of Otto Runz, and Otto Runz also helped the Grimm's brothers in composing this particular tale, and hence there is a detailed description of pregnancy in this story, which is not there in almost all other stories compiled by Brothers Grimm. Here, her pregnancy advances with seasons. Whose pregnancy? The woman's pregnancy advances with season. The rich man's wife's pregnancy advances with season, which is also characteristic of the grotesque tradition. At the early stage of the archaic grotesque, time is given as two parallel phases of development: the initial and the terminal, winter and the spring, death and the birth. So there is also a grotesque tradition. Whenever you are telling a grotesque tale, usually there is a movement of time. It moves from the initial position to the final position. So initially everything will be good, and then it is a terminal. When the terminal position, everything will go awry and it would turn grotesque. And then there is this spring. At the beginning there will be spring, everything will be flowering, and the kind of the budding of love would be there, idealized romantic notions will be there, but towards the end all those concepts are in a way quashed. So then comes winter, then comes death and birth. So birth and death is also a cyclical process. At the death of a person, another person's birth is being marked, like in the story. At the birth of the child, the death of the woman is marked, or at the death of the woman, the birth of the child is marked. So it is a continuous cyclical process. Now, while pregnant, the woman smells the blossoms of juniper tree, ripening fruits, which she eats, and through eating, metaphorically becomes a surrogate for Mother Earth. So, this is also there. That is, it is shown that during the time of a pregnancy, the woman consumes the fruit from the tree, and by consuming the fruit from the tree, the woman metaphorically becomes the surrogate mother to Mother Earth. So it is by consuming the fruit that she became pregnant, or by consuming the fruit, she is providing nutrition to her child. Thus, the child actually belongs to Mother Earth, and the woman becomes a surrogate mother here, because she takes the fruit from Mother Earth, consumes it, becomes pregnant or gives birth to a child. Then she is giving birth to the Mother Earth's child. So she become a surrogate mother. ഒരു വിധത്തിൽ ഒരു വാടക ഗർഭപാത്രം പോലെയാണ് ഇവരുടെ womb എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. That is, she becomes a surrogate to Mother Earth. Now, she continuously, then over the course of the story, the woman continuously turns to Juniper Tree for her needs during the pregnancy. So, if she feels an increased appetite, she turns to the tree so that she could consume the fruits produced by it. So, over the course of her pregnancy, she turns to the tree for many reasons, and she turns to the tree for her needs, which strengthens her association with nature. Now, her child's physical characteristics equally reinforces the biological relationship. When she gives birth to the child she had wished, as white as snow and as red as blood, the baby boy becomes an extension of the mother's connection with nature after her death. So, even as I said before, she wanted a child who was red as blood and as white as snow. These were natural attributes, as I said. So, by giving birth to a child who is as red as blood and as white as snow, she has in turn given birth to a natural human being. So there is a biological link between the child and nature. The child is closely related to nature here. And then she says, if I die, bury me under the juniper tree. Again, she wants to become a part with nature. She wants to become a part of nature. That's why she says that if I die, please bury me under the juniper tree. Now, Bakhtin, famous critic, Mikhail Bakhtin, has spoken about the grotesque and how there is a cycle in grotesque. Whenever there is a grotesque or a macabre or a gruesome tale, there is a cycle that goes on. There is an endless chain. Even to our life, there is an endless chain, right? That is, in our life, when one body is born from the death of the preceding or older one. So, usually in a grotesque tale, one body is born from the death of the preceding or older one. That is, if a person dies, then another person is born. So it becomes a cyclical process. We too have this concept of, right, a body decaying and dying, and then the soul taking an incarnation, reincarnation, again a birth is there. So this process of reincarnation or rebirth is there across cultures, and it is also there is also an element of grotesque in it, where one life comes to an end, another begins. So it is a cyclical process. Even in our Bhagavad Gita, it is written like that. Jirnicha deham tyajichu dehi tirnam dharikkunnu vere deham nu parayunna pole. That is, a person dies, and from that dead body, another person is born. So that is there again, there is a continuation of life, and the tree marks the continuation of life in Juniper Tree. Here also, the woman dies and she is buried beneath the Juniper Tree, and the Juniper Tree in one way or the other gave birth to the boy. So this is a cyclical process which is closely associated with the tree. And later on we will find out that the tree in fact gives solace for all the members of the family, especially the boy born out of the marriage between the rich man and the pious woman, and it gives comfort to the father, again the rich man, and it gives comfort to the child which was born out of the rich man's second marriage. So again, all these concepts are there. So the tree gives comfort to all the members of the family, save for the second mother. Now we shall take a look at it. Again, we described this in detail when we talked about the imagery part, so I am leaving it. Now we shall move on towards the end of this lecture. So her husband buried her beneath the juniper tree, and he began to cry bitterly. So as said by her, as mentioned by her, the husband buried the woman beneath the juniper tree, and he began to cry bitterly. After some time, he was more at ease, and although he still cried, he could bear it. So that indicates a kind of indifference from the part of her husband. Mind you, the man was described as being rich. The man was not described, the man's presence was notably absent during her pregnancy period. Nowhere was written that the man was present or the man supported her. Only once was it written that the woman asked for comfort from the man, and someday he was able to comfort her. So there is an absence of the man throughout her pregnancy. And again, when she dies, again he cries bitterly, but after some time he is able to pull himself together, and he could bear it, which means that the man is again here indifferent, as in the case of most fathers in fairy tales. Most fathers who take second wives as mothers in fairy tales, again this is a stereotypical characterization, okay? In real life it may not be like that. So in stereotypical characterization, the man who takes a second wife does not show a considerable amount of mourning period, which means that he does not mourn the death of his wife. He does not show, or he does not perform any of the mourning rituals, or it is quickly done. So his mourning time is surprisingly brief. He himself, or the societal norm, makes him to take a new wife. That's why is that so? Why is he in a hurry to take a new wife? Maybe he wants an enabler. He wants someone to look after him. He wants someone to look after the child that is left behind. So he is in hunt for an enabler. That is the reason why he is shown as being indifferent towards his wife's death. After some time, he has to put himself together. He has to man up. So that is also there, the stereotypical manning up, where the man has to take another enabler or a person who might provide him with food and the needs that are essential for a man, and the child will be taken care of. So that concept is also there. So the stereotypical characterization is seen evident in Juniper Tree, especially in the characterization of the male figure. Now we shall discuss the later part of the story in another lecture. I hope that this was clear. Thank you for listening. Take care.